Grade R pupil in Limpopo was found in a pit toilet. The little girl was found dead at Mahlodimela Primary School in the Sengatane Village, just outside Seshego. This incident highlights the fact that most people in South Africa still do not have access to toilets and adequate sanitation. In the studio this morning, we are joined by Niki Stein, who is an attorney at Section 27, to talk more about this issue. Niki, thank you for joining us and welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, thank you.
Is your organisation winning the battle of making sure that learners have access to proper toilets within Limpopo?
I think it's a long and a slow battle, and we certainly have seen progress from the Department of Education. Last year they provided us with a plan to build new toilets at about 400 schools in the province, and we've seen quite good progress on that plan, a lot of schools getting their new toilets. One of our biggest concerns, though, is that there are countless schools that do not have any kind of appropriate sanitation facilities, and there seems to be no plan to address these. The department has now come out and said that they have a plan to eradicate all pit toilets by the end of March this year, and we'll have to monitor that very closely to see that it in fact happens.
Yeah. How bad is the situation? I mean, obviously, you know, this has all been highlighted now because of this incident and this very, very sad incident of the loss of a life of a grade R pupil. I mean, I can't even imagine something like that happening in this day and age. Is this an isolated incident, or is it something that happens regularly, but we're just being made aware of it now?
This is an unbelievable tragedy, but unfortunately it's not surprising. Looking at the state of toilets across schools in Limpopo province and other provinces, we see toilets collapsing, we see toilets without doors, we see full pits. A couple of months ago, 2 learners at one of our client schools were bitten by poisonous snakes and had to be rushed to the clinic. And so, although this is an enormous tragedy, there are problems that are incredibly widespread. And, you know, this is certainly not an isolated incident.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking when one thinks about it. You know, what are the consequences of using pit toilets? Because, you know, you look at the loss of a life, but, you know, perhaps we take it a little bit too lightly that, okay, well, there are pit toilets, we'll get to fixing them and it'll eventually come right. But, I mean, you know, something like this is unacceptable. So let's talk about the consequences of pit toilets and, of course, of this inadequate sanitation that is existing currently.
There are a number of consequences. Our focus is obviously on the health and education consequences. Pit toilets and inappropriate sanitation facilities in general are linked to higher learner absenteeism, particularly among teenage girls who have reported that they miss up to a week of school every month because there's no way for them to manage their periods at school. We have learners who are too scared to go to the toilet. We have learners exposed to safety risks when they have to walk into the bushes to relieve themselves or walk to the neighboring villages. Of course, the health risks, and particularly in younger children who are more prone to diseases like diarrhea, the health risks there are enormous. And of course, from a human rights perspective, the right to dignity, the right to privacy, the right to equality, all of those rights are guaranteed in the Constitution, and all of those rights are being violated in the most serious way.
Yeah. Obviously, you've been engaging with the Limpopo Department of Education. What are they doing about this? We've
been talking to them about this for about 18 months. They came up with a plan at the beginning of last year to address the facilities at about 200 schools, then increased that to about 400. We've been monitoring implementation of that plan very closely, and it seems to be going quite well. Apart from some delays in construction, many schools on the plan have got their toilets. But since the department came up with that plan, we've had many schools contacting us to ask how they can actually get onto the plan. They have no sanitation facilities, or they've got toilets in an absolutely disgusting state. And there seems to be no plan to address them. The Department of Education, despite being asked for about a year what the criteria are that are used to identify the priority schools, have almost suggested that there are no objective criteria, that schools are either lucky enough to get onto the plan or not. And that's something that urgently needs to be addressed. What they need to be doing is a thorough audit of all of the schools in the province and come up with a plan to address it as soon as possible.
No doubt something's going to be done at this school now, after this little girl.
Of course, but
passed on.
what we're calling for is something a lot broader than that.
Well, you know, that's what's upsetting, is because it's taken the death of a great art pupil to see something done. So is that the criteria, that somebody needs to die?
Certainly it should not be. And I think even getting to the stage where toilets are collapsing, luckily I don't know of any instances where the toilets have collapsed with someone in them, but we have got a number of schools where during the rainy season, which is now, the building has actually completely collapsed and crumbled.
Yeah.
So I think rather than wait for another tragedy, rather than wait for another specific crisis to come to a head, we're in a sanitation crisis, and the department needs to step up and do something about it. And I think there as well, the role of the private sector is important.
Yeah, that was my closing question to you. The private sector, you're engaging with them. Are they helping? Something happening there?
What we've done is we've put out a call for construction companies, and with particular focus on the construction companies that actually admitted to bid rigging from the period 2006 to 2010. We've put out a call to those construction companies to come forward and donate their time, their resources, their skills to assisting the department in addressing the sanitation crisis.
Yeah.
We have had a couple come forward, but we encourage more to come forward. It's an enormous crisis. There certainly will be no shortage of work to do.
Yeah.
And we believe that it is their social and moral responsibility to actually step up and do it.
All right, Niki, thank you very, very much for joining us here on Morning Live. Such a tough issue, but this is the issue of pit toilets in Limpopo, and of course the impact that it has on the learners in that particular area. And it's not just Limpopo, because this is a nationwide problem, but we're just focusing in on Limpopo for now. Niki Stein, thank you for joining us, attorney at Section 27.